Welcome to another episode of the WAN Manager podcast. I'm your host, Bryan, and this is the show where we talk to networking experts about the data services that make business possible. So we've talked a fair bit about the middle mile and network as a service. For example, we had Christian Koch on talking about that. And we've touched on various companies that are emerging around these issues. So for that, I'm very pleased to welcome the CEO of one of those various companies, Dave Ward from PacketFabric. Welcome, Dave.
Hey, thanks, Greg. And if this is the WAN Manager podcast, that's got to make you the WAN man. So I'm pretty psyched to be here to chat with you and your audience. So
Absolutely.
let's go for it.
You know, we were thinking about having a contest at some point for the listeners who can come up with the best WAN pun. So mine, of course, is I'm a WANalist, right? But yeah.
I'm just going to let that go to the catcher. The only thing I can say is it's not family friendly, so I'm just going to go there.
That's right. Yeah. All right. So, Dave, we usually like to start out with letting my guests introduce themselves. You have a really extensive background on sort of the equipment manufacturing end of the business. Could you give us a quick overview of where you come from and then how you came to PacketFabric?
Sure. I emerged as a fully grown adult from the ocean one day. I just walked out of the sea. No, kidding aside.
With a Cisco certification already embedded, right?
Yes, already tattooed with a bridge. I'm going to tell a little bit longer story just to kind of give an idea of how long I've been in this WAN business. I originally was at the University of Minnesota and left the University of Minnesota doing a large-scale, high-speed deployment. Actually, one of the first production deployments of ATM. I apologize to all of those, but nonetheless, we were doing a distributed processing project and also tried to do a speed test versus those distributed workstations over a high-speed network on campus to supercomputers, which meant that we had to invent how to network supercomputers back in the day. Well, long story short, there's a very long story there. I decided to go to a startup called Netstar, which built the world's first distributed router, meaning independent forwarding boards running different protocols. One was FIDI, one was Ethernet, one was ATM, one was HISI, HIPPY, all back in the day. And that company was acquired by Ascend Communications. And many folks may remember Ascend if you ever had an ISDN link. And right before Ascend acquired Lucent, I left and went to the Internet Engineering Group out of Ann Arbor, Michigan, which was composed of a number of developers and operators out of Merit. And so this whole focus that I've had really for my career, yes, I've done a bunch of LAN work and Wi-Fi radio work in the past, but really was around wide area networking. And so at the Internet Engineering Group, we sold routing software because back in the late 90s, routing software was some serious black magic stuff. And system design and kernel design and forwarding plane design and things like that to all of those networking startups in the big heyday of WAN networking, when investors were investing heavily in that space. Well, December 17th, 1999, at 3:15 p.m., but who's counting? I signed to join Cisco Systems because they acquired the Internet Engineering Group, and we were the first and very contentious acquisition by Cisco at that time because they had never acquired a routing software group because Cisco had all of the routing software gurus.
Really? In 1999? That's interesting. Yeah.
Well, if you recall back in the day, there's a big brain drain to go form Juniper Networks. And a lot of those routing gurus left Cisco and went over to form Juniper. And so Cisco, again, in a contentious acquisition, acquired us. And interestingly, December 17th was a Friday afternoon. Monday, the 20th, I show up with a good friend of mine at the group, who's now still at Juniper. And we were wearing Birkenstock shorts and probably mustard stained T-shirts and the rest of it. And we walked into Building 10, the executive building of Cisco, and I was met by this guy with a southern drawl, John Chambers. I said, "Hey, come on in. Let me introduce you to the team." Well, we walked in, and there was Van Jacobson and Fred Baker and Dave Aran and all these luminaries and people I looked up to at the IETF. I was pretty big in the IETF in those days, or I was participating. I wasn't a big big influence, but I was participating.
Right.
And here I am standing in front of 150 of the legends of the internet, and Chambers hands me a pen and says, "Draw our next internet core router." Turned to the rest of the group, said, "Let's see what we bought," and walked out of the room. And I didn't even
No
say my name at the
pressure.
time.
Yeah.
But that turned into,
Yeah.
long story short, again, many long stories here, but that turned into iOS XR, which is to this day Cisco's service provider router operating system. We built the CRS-1. We acquired Pirelli roughly at the same time to build optical shelves and optical modules. That CRS-1 turned into the CRS-3, turned into the CRS-10, went and worked a bit on the ASR 9K, the ASR 1K. From there, worked on the 8K, the NCS 8K at this point, the NCS 5500. If it was big iron, I was working on it at Cisco, and
Hmm.
not to tout it too hard, but uh, for a while there, I did 24 of the internet's fastest routers in a row. And interestingly, as bizarre as it sounds,
Wow.
I kind of got bored. There's like, Dave's the router guy, and Dave can
Yeah.
do whatever he
Yeah.
wants as long as he builds routers. But I actually wanted to do something different, so I jumped over to Juniper for a couple of years, and where I had a number of
Hmm.
life friends, as I mentioned before, and had an opportunity to work
Right.
what I thought was an entire portfolio, and started working on next gen Junos and 3D chipsets and the PTX and a number of platforms there, and then got a phone call again from a guy in a southern drawl who said, "We really want you to come back." So I went back to Cisco for my second 9.5 year stint. But there I had a bigger job. I was a chief architect over at Cisco across the whole portfolio. Worked on a lot of the iron, a lot of the acquisitions, a lot of the ASICs, a lot of optical modules, expansion of XR. So I've been in and around WAN equipment, but that's really, that in and
Hmm.
itself is kind of interesting and a huge technical challenge. But really, how I want to tie this back to the conversation we're having today is, when you go and build WAN equipment, you really build it for very specific customer situations, and really the tier one, tier two
Mm.
customers of the internet. And I say that because
Hmm.
those customers really end up driving the entire industry. So whether it was a multi-chassis router, or it was a low-cost, high capacity router, or it's now a 1RU, take one of those big router blades and turn it on its side and make that a modular router where you can rack and stack and pay as you
Hmm.
grow. All of those
Right.
different designs really came out of what is necessary for the internet core backbone, and what is it necessary for a telco WAN routing solution, where tier one, like in the US, you're talking about 50 million subscribers or households, and you're talking, it's same thing in Europe, and same thing all
Right.
around the Asia Pacific and those other countries. So WAN routing's in my blood, and in the last
Hmm.
stint at Cisco, programmable networking got in my blood. And what I mean by this is, the internet
Ah, yes.
architecture, I felt, had a huge stall after MPLS VPNs. And sure, there was plenty of tunneling
Hmm.
pieces, and there's plenty of interesting advancements, all of them rather incremental and none of them leapfrogging. And obviously, if you're in and around the industry, you know that the biggest conversation has been around software defined networking. And being a WAN guy, I
Right.
found that the conversation around software defined networking, limited to just data centers and limited to just data center switching,
Yes.
really was a
Absolutely.
very limiting part of the architecture. Where what I want to build in the internet is that I can program the bandwidth at any time, in real time, on demand, anywhere I want to go. I'm going to get
Hmm.
guaranteed bandwidth, guaranteed latency, just like I can out of the protocols that we've talked about already out of MPLS, let's say. But I only have to pay for what I use.
Right.
I don't need to pay for these big, fat, expensive circuits. And this notion of network as a service and software defined networking taken to the WAN now is the conversation inside WAN, inside the WAN community. And I say that because not only did the internet
Right.
architecture stall, not becoming programmable, telco's architectures really stalled, because they are not cloud companies. They are not cloud first. They are not building the cloud
Hmm.
connectivity
Hmm.
necessary for enterprises and what we need to drive business across all of society. And I say that because enterprise IT architectures are now not just driven out of the cloud, not just hybrid cloud, they are fully multi-cloud. Different SaaS applications have different clouds. There's
Right.
security
Right.
clouds, as you know,
Absolutely.
UC
Yeah.
clouds, storage clouds, on and on and on, as well as public clouds and then private data centers. That is,
Well,
in
yeah, I
fact,
mean,
the
even just
enterprise IT
classic,
architecture.
cloud services. Yeah, right. Exactly. No matter what you're doing, you're still using multiple providers. Even just infrastructure as a service, most people still have multiple infrastructure as a service providers. Certainly. So you bring up a really good point that I want to touch on a little more deeply, which is that so we at TeleGeography founded the WAN Summit in 2013 just because there wasn't a conference like focused specifically on the enterprise WAN. There was lots of stuff going on around that time, whether it was, MEF oriented or layer 1, 2, 3 kind of events for SDN as what I would, have thought of then as uniquely a kind of carrier technology for facilitating OSS, BSS, that kind of thing. Um, how are you guys bringing what that promise of SDN was? I mean, how long have we been hearing people say, "Oh, we want bandwidth on demand for the enterprise," and I have never seen it emerge as a commercial model from the carriers. Is it a commercial model now? Is bandwidth on demand real?
It's not from the carriers; it is from
Right.
PacketFabric. And
Mm-hmm.
let me just tease apart and unpack a bit what you said because it's key. So
Yeah.
the existing organizations, often standards bodies, decided to start talking about SDN and then start adding some programmable interfaces inside their legacy stack.
Right.
So it literally is just putting more lipstick on a pig, but nonetheless, those ancient, and what I mean by ancient is decades old IT stacks and ways of doing OSS, BSS, and the patchwork quilt of tools necessary to do it is a complete and utter dead end. The different architectures that are
Mm.
being put in place and requirements that standards bodies are inventing requirements for themselves, which is always an interesting case, have really put the entire telecommunications industry delayed and slowed them down by over a decade. The last decade was lost with the SDN conference lifestyle that is exactly what you're describing. I mean, being a little
Mm.
bit more harsh than you are to this because
Mm-hmm.
look, I was there. I was talking at those
Sure.
conferences thinking we were making progress.
Yeah.
In fact, we weren't making progress, and you can see this uh, instead of just
Mm-hmm.
as one guy's opinion or maybe two guys' opinions. The Look at the products that are available in the industry today to actually deliver software defined WAN or bandwidth as a service. They're effectively non-existent, or somebody's invented one tool that needs to fit within a 42 piece puzzle to actually make something work. And it
Mm.
just,
Mm-hmm. Right.
no one has shown that they can make it work. It requires a huge amount of development, a huge amount of cost, obviously a huge amount of time, and frankly, none of the tier one, tier two, tier one through three telcos have really proven this model out at all that they can make it work. Now, it's not just the legacy OSS stack, it's also the legacy business model and the way that quote circuits
Mm-hmm.
are, 56K lines or ISDN lines, and it's still being sold that way versus a notion of real time on demand with real time on demand bandwidth and also pay for what you use. And those two technology and business disruptions were required to make network as a service possible here in the 2020s.
Right. And that's an interesting way of thinking about it from a kind of almost economics perspective of how innovation happens within a very entrenched industry, if you will. Right. And what I mean by that is maybe you know this story and correct me if I have it wrong, but I kind of recall that the Viptela team were largely some folks at Cisco who left because in order to really make SD-WAN the way that they saw it, they had to go out, be a startup, and then got swept back into the company, right? So if I have that sort of mythology right, the point being that sometimes there's this energy and ability to step back from a legacy system out of a startup that can innovate in ways that some larger companies that don't have that same inertia struggle with, frankly.
Yeah, and without talking about the Cisco Viptela situation,
Hmm.
I'm going to generalize it, which may be applicable to that situation, that the amount of time necessary able that's required, and that a large company, whether it's a telco or otherwise, is able to give an innovation or incubation team is longer than the patience than they have for large streams of revenue. And a startup
Mm-hmm.
is
Hmm.
not needing $1 billion or more dollars a year out of every innovation project. They're able to start with a
Right.
much smaller number with higher growth. But unfortunately, that doesn't fit into necessarily a large company's P&L balance sheet. And so you often
Right.
do need to have entrepreneurs go out, take some risk, and take some time and build out technology. And frankly, that's what we ended up doing here at PacketFabric. Our intellectual
Hmm.
property is our software platform. Even though we
Right.
started the conversation talking about hardware platforms and a history of hardware platforms, really, we use off the shelf packet flingers, from all the common companies out there. But really, what the clear intellectual property is the software platform, not limited or stymied by a 20-year-old stack, or limited or stymied by any of those patchwork quilt of tools. In fact, interestingly, um, we refuse to use equipment that requires a very specific software tool to run it. We work directly with the APIs or
Mm.
with any interface that
Hmm.
the device gives us, which means we're not locked into these SDN religion wars. And even though this religion is just about done with OpenFlow or NetConf Yang, or is it protobufs, or is it
Right.
gRPC? Like, who cares? Customers want real-time on-demand bandwidth. They don't necessarily care if we're, you know, uh, OpenFlow or Yang purists. Instead, make it work. And that's
Right.
that's
Right.
really what's driving that business
Hmm.
economy,
Hmm.
as you say, which is make it work and make it solid and make it redundant and make it telco grade, but don't give me that telco experience.
Yeah, so I just wanted to jump in and say that we've had Jezebel Gilmore at the WAN Summit before, kind of give that story. Could you maybe back up a step and say, what did Packet Fabric come in a few years ago and say, this is what we're going to do? Are you buying wavelengths between data centers? Is it, you mentioned it's really the software that's over that transport? What is the sort of core commercial offering to the enterprise, if that question makes sense, just to pull it back and say, this is where we're at with this.
Sure. And it's changed since I joined PacketFabric May
Hmm.
1st of 2020. So
Yeah, and I'm
where
going to
we
say I
are.
heard this story in like 2017, 18 probably, so I really could use a refresher personally even. So yeah.
So really what we're focusing on right now is being an agile cloud core. And what that means
Hmm.
is we've got a fabric, which means, and here's what's different about being a telco. How a fabric is different than a VPN or different than telco DIA circuits and the like is we do have our own underlay network. We lease
Hmm.
we lease spectrum, we lease fiber, we have our own network. We have our own routers. And we connect and have built a fabric between private data center operators, public cloud, all of those service clouds I just went through, security, storage,
Right.
UC, all the different SaaS plays, etc. And we have that network lit. What I mean is the ports are ready for use. Instead of doing truck
Hmm.
rolls and digging trenches, we light our
Hmm.
entire network and all the ports. That means that through our software platform on top, we can configure and provision real-time on-demand circuits, build your own network, cloud connectivity, etc., between all of those clouds, between those data centers to an enterprise, and have it available on demand. And so, what we've seen,
Right.
just before I step
So
forward, a quick tangent. What we've seen, during the pandemic is enterprises that needed to get to cloud instantaneously could not wait the 6 weeks plus for a telco to deliver these circuits. They picked up the
right.
phone, they called Packet Fabric and said, I need I need to build my new IT network and I need it built now. And here we are with a lit network. And What I mean by real-time on demand is we can configure end-to-end ports across our network sub-minute. We can do virtual circuits, sub 20 seconds. And this means that you can use our platform, which has got both a user interface as well as APIs, and can be integrated into workflow managers such that you can have the job, which could be archive, backup, disaster recovery, whatever the case, or it could be a media
Hmm. Hmm.
production in the cloud, and dial up and down the bandwidth where you need it, when you need it, how you need it, and only pay for what you use. So the platform now is
Right.
not only config and provisioning, it's more telemetry than you get out of any normal NMS, because we aren't bound just to SNMP or TL1 or any of these other protocols, which so many legacy operational systems are bound to. And then we had to build our
Hmm.
own BSS, because we do know that whether you're an enterprise or you're an MSP, having contextualization of who's ordering up the bandwidth, dialing it up and down, allows you to then see departmental activities in use of bandwidth. Or if you're an MSP, it allows you to have
Hmm.
hierarchical billing for your partners, their VARs, and the end customer. And so this complete rewrite of scratch of an operational platform, a telemetry platform, and a BSS platform is really fundamentally what sets PacketFabric apart. Of Because we're telco grade, what I
Hmm.
mean by that
Hmm.
is we have redundant fiber and spectrum everywhere. We have redundant hardware stacks everywhere. Our software is cloud first, cloud native. And so therefore we can scale out horizontally. We are not bound to any notion of an SDN controller and all those conversations of many years of, which
Right.
controller is compatible with this, that, and the other thing, or any proprietary orchestration system. We built this ourselves, and it's really a tribute to the net developers, not just network operators, but developers who came out of networking and operations, who have built the system before, perhaps several times for other carriers, who did not move forward with those projects or could not instantiate it, came to PacketFabric and said, "Right, let's just get this done and prove that this can be done, and it can be proven to
Hmm.
be cost effective, profitable, and the rest of it as a business." And that's where we are today. In addition, just one last note, and then I'll let you cut in, the notion of cloud routing.
Yeah.
Back to the internet architecture piece, cloud routing has become very interesting because, look, the hybrid cloud architecture of enterprises, which includes going to a private data center operator and say a public cloud or multiple public clouds, had a notion of a gateway somewhere. So
Right.
anytime you wanted to move traffic between clouds or
Hmm.
between services, you have this weird tromboning, which goes back and forth between the gateway to these different clouds. Because we've got a live active fabric, we can do cloud routing between clouds, between data center operators, using our fabric. And in public cloud, it's reducing egress charges massively, up to 40%. And that can actually be acquired
Hmm. Hmm.
independently of our fabric itself. Tying in the notion of cloud routing and multi-cloud workflows and having it fully programmatic has led to really a fundamental change, not only in the internet architecture pieces that I've mentioned, but in enterprise IT architecture, which dramatically needed an upgrade for the last 8 to 10 years.
Yeah, no, actually, that kind of leads into to what I was thinking about here, which is, we're telegeography, we like maps. My first question along those lines is I reckon that your physical footprint that you have as this sort of always on lit service, if you will, is designed around CSP on ramp kind of nodes. Is that the general idea, or is there something more to it than that?
We're in IXs, CSP on ramps,
Hmm.
and multi regional on ramps, of course. Private data
Hmm.
center operators and private data center operators that we partnered with. So that's why I'm calling it a cloud core, where all those
Right.
different
Right.
nodes and private peering with SaaS providers and private peering with security and storage providers, et cetera. And then, of course, partnerships with telcos as well.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
we recently
Right.
announced a big partnership with Colt in Europe to have access, so
Right.
our customers can have access to their data centers, and their customers can have access to North American data centers and services as well. And it's really focusing on not just get people to cloud, but get people to cloud productively in everything they need to do.
And then my follow up on that, especially the partnership with Colt, is interesting. How are so your enterprise customers, right? Not the channel partnerships. How are they getting to you for the most part? Are they buying DIA from the likes of a Colt to get from their premises to PacketFabric?
Couple different ways. We do work with access providers that can get direct access to us in one of our data center locations, um,
Hmm.
as well as there's still a role for carriers to provide these type and
Hmm.
other metro carriers in particular, for which in North America there's
Right.
a large, and in Europe, metro fiber, as you know, and the cost of metro fiber, and you're the expert here, really has dramatically declined. And so the amount of metro fiber
That
that's
is
available to
true. I
connect
can
to us,
vouch for that for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
that metro fiber is available. And so connectivity, honestly, even across North America and Europe, just to talk about two markets, we can pretty much get those circuits turned on in 72 hours or less. And so that is the long pole in
Hmm.
getting to Packet Fabric, but it's a pretty amount of time, and fairly straightforward these days.
Right, right. But the upshot there is that, in this long conversation we've all been having over the past several years about the sort of bandwidth on demand concept for the end user, when ultimately they're still having to connect the premises to the data center. So most of the on demand part is still within the network itself. Are we moving toward a true end to end on bandwidth on demand kind of scenario?
Are you going to use the term? Are you going to go there? Greg, are you going to say
Yeah.
5G?
US. Well, yeah. Okay. So that, I mean, that's exactly what I was going for, right? But so folks, maybe even it's useful to pause the podcast. I hate to say that because you want to stay glued to the set, right? But you have a great blog post that folks should check out called 5G Cloud Core Slice as a Service isn't just for pizza, right? So that's where I'm getting this Agile Cloud Core CEO talking about 5G. I take it you're not directly involved in the 5G market in the provider kind of way, but why are you writing about 5G when you're a cloud core company then?
Yeah, we don't own spectrum. We don't sell mobile handsets. We're not putting radios on poles. But the key part of linking the two parts of the conversation is really that promise of 5G for end-to-end bandwidth. So
Hmm.
where private LTE or uh, fixed mobile access using 5G for an access circuit, um, those
Right.
radios and those packet gateways are now in the market and are being deployed such that bandwidth can be controlled, but in that access circuit. Here's where telcos stumble. They don't
Hmm.
have the core network that is real time on demand that can do 5G slicing. Now, just quickly, 5G slicing is where you have the ability
Right.
to buy 100 gig or hundreds of gigs or whatever from a telco as a corporation or as a business, wherever you may be. You want guaranteed amount of bandwidth, and you want it to all the sites that you're located, including to mobile handsets as people are moving around. Okay, what does that mean? You need to
Right.
be able to flexibly orchestrate the radio side, the handset to the pole, to the radio on the pole. But then where's the telco promise there? Because throughout the whole conversation, um, we've been a little bit snarky towards the telcos, but in fact, it's true. They don't have the ability to control their core on demand or their WAN on demand, whichever word you like to use. They don't have connectivity to the data centers.
Hmm.
And the reason why data centers and cloud are so important is that the user experience of 5G and of mobile phones now and of fixed mobile access and all of enterprise and consumer is defined. My definition is the amount of latency between the handset and the cloud. And any one of the clouds that you want to go to, whether it's a business
Hmm.
oriented salesforce.com, or it's you're downloading a video, or you're doing storage, or you're uploading photos, or you're doing anything that you want to do.
Yeah, I mean that's something that comes up on the show often. Yeah, sorry. Just real quick. I mean, that comes up on the show often. That the way that we used to talk about performance when you had an MPLS network was about the performance of the network. Your SLAs, your jitter, packet loss was about the network from end to end. Enterprises don't want to talk about network performance now; they want to talk about application performance, right? So it's all about your SLAs metrics are important for the application and when the application is inevitably in the cloud now, and so network melts away in a certain sense, but then becomes more important than ever in another sense, right? So it's like a yin and a yang there,
Yeah, it's the user experience is being defined by what they're looking at, which is the application.
Right,
And the
right.
major contributor to that in many cases is in fact the use of overlay tunnels to get to the cloud. And there's a zillion overlay
Mm-hmm.
players out there today who are making it easier to get to cloud, but no better
Mm-hmm.
experience, no guarantees of bandwidth or SLA. So this is why I focus so much time
Right.
on is do you have this out of your underlay such that you can guarantee bandwidth, such that you can do on demand and you can do things like 5G slicing. So if I'm running my enterprise out of the cloud, whether it's using 5G access or using my mobile handset for my mobile force, do I have the ability to get bandwidth and get connectivity to where I need it to go on demand? And that's why PacketFabric is uniquely positioned and why telcos are really going to struggle in this space. They're the ones who have spent billions of dollars on spectrum, billions of dollars on radios and new radios to be installed, in any nation state and around the globe. But in the last 10 years or
Mm-hmm.
even longer, there has been no expenditure of capital to get to cloud, to connect to clouds, to upgrade their core, to change the software out. Lots and lots of conferences, lots and lots of conversations, lots and lots of specifications that are going nowhere,
Mm-hmm.
open source projects that aren't being adopted. The industry's in a troubling case. But the reason why I put my money where my mouth is at Packet Fabric is that they weren't Packet Fabric is not bound by any of those pieces. We are presenting a platform to our users that is programmable, that can be integrated into these workflows,
Mm-hmm.
that can be used for 5G slicing. And our role in 5G is really providing that programmable real-time on-demand core that's going to be necessary for 5G. And in particular, a unique and different billing system that allows for the contextualization that I described and for pay for what you use. And that also is
Mm-hmm.
necessary for 5G because if you're mobile and
Right.
moving, we need to follow not only Greg and Dave, but maybe you need to follow our departments and you certainly need to follow the companies that we work for. And that needs to be able to be contextualized across the entire network. So it is a combination of all those pieces that have to come together for 5G slicing to emerge. And here we are. And so towards the end
Right.
of kind of how this comes together, we found ourselves in a unique position where I was very worried coming to Packet Fabric that telcos were just going to 800-pound gorilla us into the ground, because we're a startup
Right.
and they have,
Mm-hmm.
hundreds of millions of dollars of market cap and billions of dollars of revenue and just massive, massive, massive companies. But in fact, because of the situation that I described, that they've spent a lot of money on spectrum and radios and not spent it on cloud connectivity, I've moved Packet Fabric to actually be focused on partnering and channel and to enable telcos,
Right.
cable companies, and others to be powered by Packet Fabric. And quote, I'll use terms I don't like, but nonetheless, they're common in the industry. White labeling our portal, white labeling our APIs. I'm happy to be powered by Packet Fabric
Mm-hmm.
underneath and allow somebody else to take their giant brand and take that to market. And it's a great place for us to be, but it's also a great way to move this internet architecture forward. And that's really part of what I'm trying to do as well.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, I'm an analyst. I'm neutral on all of these things. But I have a lot of conversations with carriers, and there is a continuum of opinions there from that ranges from there's still a few out there that are doggedly holding on to an MPLS kind of vision of the world to a few that are like, hey, look, we know that, so multi-cloud connectivity is what really matters, along with getting to the customer premises, right? So it seems to me there's the possibility for, let's use another odious business term, a lot of synergy, right, between the folks who are putting that investment into making 5G so widely available at the customer premises level on that edge, but then being able to actually make it perform with the applications on the other side of that two-sided kind of market, right?
There
So
is, and really, what's changing in that part of the architecture, and now we'll move to another big industry subject, which is what about this whole edge movement? What does that really mean?
yes,
Well, what that
indeed,
means is that the internet exchanges, which used to be in very large centralized locations and then went regional, of course, when things like Netflix and Google Global Cache and others
hmm
started, and Akamai started putting,
CDNs,
so
yeah,
yeah, CDNs out in the edge. That moved to regional and metro peering. Well, now the internet exchanges and peering and where those interconnections are happening is directly at the tower. And
right,
so as you're able to see the ability to dial up real time in demand as close to that radio as possible, not only can you have processing, you can have cloud access as close to the edge as possible.
right,
And as we know, a number of the big public cloud providers and other stack vendors are starting to put things out at the edge and starting to move these pieces out. And so, uh, storage clouds, security clouds, which today are centralized into large public cloud spaces, also can move out to the edge because start tying this together. Mobile to
hmm
cloud, internet exchanges moving to the edge out to the tower. Enterprises wanting to get away from expensive telco access lines, moving to SD-WAN and using consumer internet with a tunneling
right,
technology to a gateway. Today, in today's internet architecture, those gateways are in a public cloud frequently. Then storage services in another cloud, and security services in another cloud, which leads to tromboning of traffic again across all
hmm
of these
hmm
clouds.
right,
And then back again, and if you add in unified communications or what tools like we're using today, those are often in another cloud. So now we have this crazy path that our traffic is actually taking. So back to your point before, application performance is being dictated by network performance because of the internet architecture that's been created of snaking and tromboning this traffic through all these different clouds for the services that are necessary for treatment. Let's
right,
shut down that architecture and use the edge, move the SD-WAN gateways to the points of presence of a network as a service, move those storage
hmm
nodes, move those security nodes out, potentially even have those all the way at the tower. Now you and I and enterprises and all consumers will have a single flow of traffic from their
right,
mobile device or from their enterprise into the cloud without lots of tromboning and snaking because there's a fabric underneath it. And that's really how
right,
this kind of ties together of why a fabric is necessary. Features like Cloud Router are necessary to optimize between clouds. And in particular, by having all these services already connected to the fabric, there is not the tromboning that you see in an otherwise overlay laden, MPLS laden, legacy
hmm
operational system laden internet architecture. That's really what you asked me, I think 20 minutes ago now. What is the target that Packet Fabric's going after? That's the target we're
right,
going after, and why I call it an agile cloud
right,
core, because
hmm
we can fix the network performance and that network architecture that's hampering application performance because we simply have a different design for the way the internet should be constructed and how to program and orchestrate the paths that are now flowing between all these different clouds.
yeah, absolutely. That's a really, really fascinating picture. To think about how the centralized breakouts, the problem with that is the tromboning. You're describing how getting rid of those centralized breakouts then created a new set of tromboning, sort of, and that's the problem that's sort of emerging here, which is a way I hadn't really heard it phrased before. That's really interesting. Yeah. So now, waxing philosophical, if you will, stepping back from the sort of role in the network, what do you see as the sort of key apps or use cases from the enterprise side that this facilitates? Like what does the future look like for the end user in terms of being able to do things that potentially we can't do right now?
So there's a few industries that are really driving, are at the tip of the spear, right at the tip of the spear. Certainly,
Hmm.
media and entertainment is there, and their movement of
Right.
production studios in the cloud. So great, you now
Yeah.
are doing potentially shoot to cloud, which is maybe a little bit beyond the tip of the spear, but you still have the notion of a production studio in the cloud. Second, coming out of that is also that they want to be able to do their post processing and VFX out of the cloud, and a lot of those employees are spread out all over the
Hmm.
globe. And the world
Right.
in that world, there are still different tools that are cloud specific. So maybe you do some post processing in let's say Azure, just for a sake of example, but then you do your transcoding and distribution out of Amazon, just for example. You could have inserted Google for doing rendering, or any combination of those, because a lot of these
Sure.
public clouds
Yeah.
have specialized in their tools. So now you ask, what is our role in this? Now you have the ability, instead of having massive cost tromboning and IT headaches, to be able to string together these very large bandwidth requiring, low latency requiring workloads, and put them on a fabric and enable that to happen. So we do lots of work in media and entertainment. Second, we know that the healthcare industry, of course, is undergoing a lot of aggregation. It's had a lot of activity, of course, over the last year or so, but still, really, the notion of
Hmm.
how our payer provider system works is really a cloud-based and multi-cloud workflow mechanism. And so we can transform the industries that already have made moves to private data centers, further moves into public cloud, and be able to tie those
Hmm.
together. Of course, the financial industry is another obvious one, with the way that front ends and back ends are working across on-prem, private data centers, and public clouds for transactions. That one is very interesting, not only because of the bandwidth, but really because of the low latency requirements that are necessary for consumer transaction processing, as well as the application development pieces. And last, look, I'd be remiss. We've already talked about 5G, so that means we have to bring up IoT. And the interesting piece
Right.
of the way many IoT and smart city workflows are working out is they're already multi-cloud, because certain clouds are better at certain types of AI, or certain types of data ingest, or have certain types of
Hmm.
object store capabilities. And as an IoT vendor start begins to bring in data associated with their sensors or their actuators or whatever that's being worked on, could be elevators, the
Right.
owners of the buildings need certain amount of data. Facilities management needs certain types of data, and on and on. And so,
Hmm.
therefore, these now become multi-party, multi-cloud workflow, again, really suited for a fabric. And although perhaps I pulled out some known use cases, the reason why I focused on these fairly known use cases is really that they all have something in common. They're often multi-user, they're all multi-cloud, and the old conversation around move to cloud or the hybrid cloud architectures, that's really not the conversation going on. It's really, how do I orchestrate workloads across multiple clouds and across not only multiple geographies,
Right.
but where my employees are also located, which is most often global. And so you need to be able to move data
Hmm.
even within a public cloud very rapidly, or between public clouds very rapidly across the globe, to be able to have the employee base service the business and the consumers associated with it. And again, that is necessitating a fabric, and one that is not statically created, or statically created either with DIA
Right.
or typical cloud links, or with MPLS VPNs.
Hmm. Yeah, not just global either, but distributed globally, even at that. So not concentrated in the CBD of major metros anymore, even, right? So especially when you're talking about an engineer getting an output from an IoT device or whatever, that engineer now is very likely not sitting in the office, right? So with a native DIA port, pop in the basement or whatever. So yeah.
Not at all. Not at all. It's the same for artists, same for VFX, same for healthcare. It just goes on and on, that the distributed global workforce. is a real thing, and that distributed global data movement's a real thing, and therefore distributed global connectivity is necessitated by all of those facts.
Right, right, absolutely. Yeah, well, this has been really, really interesting. I wonder if to wrap up, I could ask you a vague question that I like to ask people. So I
Greg, I'm
apologize for
just
its
warming up
vagueness, but
here.
yeah, yeah, I like to think about this one in the context of everything that we're talking about. First of all, it's kind of long been the case that that the needs of IT drove the WAN IT infrastructure team. It seems like now that role is reversing a little bit, in a sense that the abilities of the WAN of the IT infrastructure team are going to drive changes in IT. Do you see that? And in a way, does this kind of make the concept of a WAN disappear, or at least fundamentally change altogether? Like we're not in what a WAN originally was a larger geographic implementation of a LAN, computers networked to each other. We almost don't even do that anymore. We're getting to a place everything else is happening over the top, right? It's a Do you see the WAN as such, as a layers 1 through 3 technology disappearing, and everything just becomes software?
Uh, well, first of all, layer 1, 2, 3 in the WAN will never disappear. Take that back, Greg. Take it back.
All right. All
Um,
right. Yeah, I sure hope so,
but
because that's my area of analysis and expertise. But yeah, yeah,
but
we have to
it is
connect. There's no doubt, right? We have to connect, but the connections is the connection still the thing? That's the.
uh, no, it's being presented as software now, which is kind of what we've been talking about for the
Right.
last bit. And
Exactly.
what's driving this, I would say, actually is even a step above WAN and WAN managers and WAN technology. It is the CIO
Mm-hmm.
of businesses. And look, they're
Mm-hmm.
contemplating why, if it's not the intellectual property of their business to own, manage, and operate a wide area network, why are they doing it? Why can they just get it from
Yeah.
somebody?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's the rise of network as a
Mm-hmm.
service, where, look, we can do
Right.
that, and we can do that for you, and we can present what was incredibly complex and incredibly cumbersome and incredibly expensive as a low cost, easy to use interface. Dial it up, dial it down, pay for what you use. That is how the WAN is going to express itself. We may be one of the early companies on this journey,
Mm-hmm.
but all
Mm-hmm.
aspects, I think, of IT certainly are going to express themselves as a service. And the WAN may not have been at the forefront of the party when it was SDN was talking about data centers. But in fact, I would say with that
Mm-hmm.
whole SDN hype curve, we are the realization, and network as a service is the realization of that original SDN vision. It did not, it might have begun in the data center, but it certainly didn't end there. And I don't think it's done yet, of being able
Right.
to continue to move networking to be delivered as a service, and all the complexity of networking to be delivered through software. I mean, right now, the network is code. And that's really the fundamental change and
Mm-hmm.
movement that I think the industry is going to be talking about for the rest of the 2020s.
Yeah, yeah. That sounds absolutely along the lines of what I was trying to articulate. So thank you for making me make some sense there. Excellent. Well, yeah. Thank you so much. This has been really interesting. I always like to close things out with this question. It's and particularly since you're sitting in an RV as we record this, so sort of doing a little bit of the digital nomad kind of thing. Now that life is returning to a little bit of normalcy to some extent, a lot of folks in the U.S. in particular, I know the world is still struggling in many places, but in the U.S. we have a lot of folks vaccinated. We're starting to do things again. What have you been missing most that you couldn't wait or can't yet wait to get out there and do now that the world is returning to some kind of baseline?
Yeah, I've lived a very international career and a very international
Hmm.
life. Most of my friends are overseas and in other countries and in other places that I can't go visit and can't see. I have a deep, deep need to see more of the planet and to be with more of my friends, and continue to see and learn more about all the people uh, in different locations and how
Yeah.
they're trying to figure this whole thing out. And I
Hmm.
love where I live, and I love the country I live in. It's a beautiful place. I've never seen more of it than I have this past year because I haven't been able to leave the borders. I
That's right.
live this digital nomadic life,
Yeah.
so that way I can continue to scratch the itch to need to see more of the planet, and to be able to do some things, that are a bit more normal. But I am missing the entire globe, and all my friends overseas, and I can't wait to be able to go visit them. But it's just not yet. We're not out. We're not out of the other side of this
Yeah.
pandemic by any
Yeah.
stretch of the imagination. So I've stayed in
Absolutely.
touch like everybody else through lots and lots of Zoom calls and lots of instant messaging, but it's just not the same. I can't wait to get to see him again.
Yeah, likewise. Cheers to that. Well, Dave, thank you so much. Folks can check out your blog post, follow PacketFabric on LinkedIn. I assume places like that. Any other sort of links you want to plug there?
Well, there's not only just the plugs for the blogs, but do check out PacketFabric.com. We're a bit different. So I've been a bit transparent today, but look, if you get to our website, you're going to see the knowledge base of all of our APIs. You're going to see the documentation that we have. We believe in full transparency of the library of APIs to make this happen. We've got everything from our locations to our pricing online. And then there's some interesting opinions out there in our blogs. Not only is there 5G piece, but more on describing what is a fabric, what is network as a service, and then some of the other pieces out there. And it's a good read if you have copious free time. But in particular, if you're a geek out there, check out the APIs, check out the interface, and we'd love to show it to
Hmm.
you. So there's a lot to see and think about in network as a service and what this means for the internet architecture, and we want to keep pushing it.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, and I look forward to hopefully being at a conference again soon, where we might have the chance to meet in person.
Hey, thanks a lot, Greg, and you are the WAN man.
That's right. There you go. All right. I'm going to leave it at that because that's the best. All right. Have a good one.
See ya.
Thanks very much for listening. The WAN Manager podcast is brought to you by TeleGeography, a division of Primetrica Incorporated, and is edited and produced by Jane Miller. I wrote the theme song you're listening to right now, and we get administrative canine support from my dog Honeybun, who you might hear chiming in from time to time when the mood strikes her. If you want to learn more about our data, head over to telegeography.com, where you can find our blog that covers many of the topics we hit here, and you can sign up for our WAN Manager newsletter. Until next time, have a great day. So guess what, folks? We got some big news at TeleGeography, and that is that we just launched our WAN Forum. What is a WAN Forum? Well, this is a content hub and community for anyone involved in the management of a WAN or in IT infrastructure for mid to large enterprises. And it's got all the analysis and content that you enjoy from TeleGeography related to the WAN, plus some extra videos, some interviews, and some special tools that we've designed just for inclusion here, like our SD-WAN vendor selector, a high-level WAN cost calculator to give you some ideas of what market prices are. Basically, if you like the kind of stuff that we talk about on this podcast, and you're an end user, we think that you'll enjoy the WAN Forum. And of course, this is a space meant to be shared, which is why a WAN Forum subscription includes access for up to 20 members of your team. So check it out by heading to wanforum.com. We'll be adding some new tools, constantly adding new analysis, and announcing some upcoming WAN Forum events very soon. So you want to make sure you bookmark that. That's wanforum.com. We can't wait to see you there and for you to dive in.